We've all had that moment where we're scrolling our favorite product site, looking for the best deal in a piece of tech we're looking for, when all of a sudden you stumble across a price you can't beat, so you immediately add it to cart and go to checkout. Well, happened to me with this random keyboard. I got this keyboard for $11.99, and I'm super excited to see if it's going to be any good or not. So today, let's find out. So my $12 keyboard from Amazon has arrived, and to my surprise, the box is kind of in bad condition. I've never seen one beat up quite this bad, but this is how it came. The box is branded the AJAZZ AK33. I'm not too sure what that means, but I do know what AJAZZ is, and this is the AK33. Even though the listing said it was a Lincoln Elec, but opening it up, we do see our AJAZZ. Now, admittedly, this is a little bit of underwhelming packaging. The box is damaged, so we hope the keyboard is not damaged. I'll point out here, it looks like it's wrapped in this like plastic cellophane. Leaves a little bit to be desired, but again, $12. We have some room for understanding. Digging more in, we have a keyboard brush. Well, that's nice. And then we have our keycap puller, standard issued. We have our USB-C cable. Again, it's just standard, nothing fancy. We have a bag of switches. It looks like a blue, a black, and a brown. Looks like our switch puller is also in there. Standard edition as well. Taking a bit of a closer look, these are AJAZZ Blues, and they are clicky. Then we have the AJAZZ Browns, which are tactile, and the AJAZZ Blacks, which are linear. Interesting touch for a $12 keyboard. But then we have our random keycaps. They say these are music band keycaps. Not really sure what that is, but I look forward to checking them out later. Now let's jump in and take a look at our keyboard here. So, looking at our $12 keyboard wrapped in cellophane, we flip it over the back. There are a ton of marks back here. I don't know if it's dirt or scratches or anything like that. I'm excited to get the packaging off and see if it's actually on the keyboard or if it's just some part of the plastic. So we're just going to go ahead and tear this open. So it's a bit of a pain, but we did get it open. Pulling it out, looks like a lot of the scuffs were on the packaging itself. And then there's this really nice peel across the back. Oh, so satisfying. Once peeled, you can see we have a really nice glossy back, which was really surprising. It is very, very plasticky, but again, we're keeping in mind it was $12, but nonetheless, it does look nice. And this is what it looks like outside of the package. Overall, pretty clean aesthetically. We can see that it's 82 key. It retains the arrow keys, and you have the full F row, which if you're looking for that, this will satisfy those needs. Flipping it up, you can see that the USB-C is in the top left, and then you can see that the plate on this has that like aluminum metal finish, and on the black, it does look pretty nice. On the back, we do have some flip-up feet. They are very loose. Looks like both of them are pretty loose actually. And then there's also, you have your little pad so you don't slide around. So now that we've taken a look at everything, let's hear how it sounds before we take it apart. Now that we've heard it, we realize we have a lot of work to do. There is a reason why this was $12. Now, it comes with these red switches, and as we heard, they don't sound good. And let me tell you, they also don't feel good. They are very mushy and very scratchy. They just simply don't feel good. So first things first, we need to get all our keycaps off here so we can proceed into the board. Also, taking off your keycaps, we'll take a look at them as well. And we'll notice that they are really, really thin. These are your standard shine throughs. This is one of the reasons why I don't like most shine throughs. They're always really thin. Now, I must say the legends on here are more clear than most, but still not a huge fan. So we'll continue pulling them off until we reveal all of our switches. Now for this, it is hot swap, so you can just go ahead and grab your switch puller and pull one off. And as you can see here, it reveals the 5-pin hot swap socket, which honestly is kind of surprising. It is a north-facing LED. This board is not RGB, it is only single backlit, so it's just the white standard backlit. But it's still there, but it is north-facing, which I know is a deal breaker for some. Here we can take a closer look at our switches. These are the AJAZZ Reds. And here it says that they're 55-gram switches and they have 2.2 millimeters of travel. But honestly, it really doesn't feel like it. They feel much lighter than 55 grams, and the travel feels more like normal, your 4 millimeters. They also don't feel good at all. They're very scratchy and they seem very inconsistent between each switch, which is really interesting. We are going to try to fix that by lubing them, but that's later on the road. For now, let's go ahead and get back to opening up this keyboard. So now that we saw the switch and we saw the socket, we'll just go back to our switch puller and start pulling off our switches. Now this is interesting. Each switch kind of had a different resistance when pulling it out. Some were very difficult to get out and some came out really smooth. So for this, I would just take it slow to make sure you don't break any of your switches and just keep at it. And before you know it, all your switches will be out. All right, we've got our switches out and I noticed there's these white particles or pieces everywhere on my keyboard and on my build mat. So I flipped over the keyboard and it dumped a bunch of these tiny little plastic pieces. I'm not sure if these are scrapings from the manufacturing process or when switches were being applied to it or put in the board, but it's a lot. And it kept showing up throughout the entire build. So that's really weird. We'll scrape all that to the side and we'll see what we're working with. All right, with our area cleaned up, we can go back to the keyboard. We'll look for some screws on the bottom here so we can start getting into this board. I don't notice any screws on the bottom, just the screws on the top. So we'll go ahead and grab our sonic screwdriver and we'll get these unscrewed. Remember, you always want to grab a small container so you don't lose screws. I have this little one here. And again, with our screwdriver, we'll just unscrew everything on the top of the plate. All right, once we have everything unscrewed, we'll go ahead and set those aside and we'll grab the top of the plate and you can pretty much just lift it straight off. I always try to lift from the front just to check, make sure there's no wires, but this one comes straight off the top. Flipping it over, we have our PCB and, surprise, surprise, an empty case. Again, $12 keyboard, we're not expecting much in here, so we are going to have to fix that. First, we're going to go ahead and grab our bowl again because we did miss one screw to separate the PCB from the plate itself. This step wasn't actually needed, but I was curious, so we did it anyway. Now, if you do need to do this step, right here there will be clips that hold this PCB to the plate after that one screw is removed. I simply lift it up on each side, separating those clips, and you're able to free the PCB from the plate itself. They are in there pretty tight, so don't be afraid to use a little bit of force. But again, if it feels like too much, just back off and reassess so you don't break anything. Again, if you are doing this, there is this really weird LED. This is your caps lock notification, but I thought it was really funny that it sticks so far off the board. I've never really seen that before. So be careful that that's there. You don't want to break that. If not, you're going to have a broken caps lock indicator. But yeah, this is what it looks like outside of it. It's a really nasty yellow and it's kind of dirty. But we're not going to see it, so that's a plus. Now we focus on our plate here. This is an aluminum plate. It's very thin. But again, we don't need it for right now, So we're going to go back over to the case itself. Now focusing on the case, we're going to use some EVA foam to dampen the sound. This is 2mm thick EVA foam. I like working with EVA foam because it's really easy to work with and it's really affordable. You can simply make indentations by pressing down, and you can make cuts where the indentations are. It makes this really easy and takes way less time to actually mold something out and fit it in this case. Once you have it cut down to size, you can also just poke it right through the posts. This is really nice, and it's really beginner friendly. So if you have some EVA foam and want some better sound, go ahead and shove it in your keyboard case. I would also like to point out that it doesn't actually have to be pretty as well. You're never going to actually see this, so you don't actually have to worry about how pleasing it is to the eye. Just as long as it's applied evenly and in most of the gaps so we can have an even sound throughout the board. Next, we'll move to our PCB and we'll apply our tape mod. This is where we put a layer of masking tape on the back of the PCB. Due to clearance, I'm only going to do one layer of tape. Typically I would do 2 to 3, but for this one, we're just going to do 1. After you have your masking tape on, we'll go ahead and grab our pair of scissors and we'll trim it down to size. Again, this doesn't have to look pretty. We're never going to see it. As long as it's functional and it's even, then we're good to go. Now that we have our tape applied, we'll go ahead and grab a tool and poke some holes where our posts come through when we're putting back our PCB into our case. Again, this step isn't needed. Most of the time I just use a force, but when things feel a little flimsy on the cheaper side, I like to put these little holes in there just in case. Again, you can do this any way you want to, but if it ever feels like you're applying too much pressure or you're worried about breaking something, just make sure you back off and reassess. Alright, now that we have all our holes poked and our case is filled, we'll grab our PCB and we're going to place it back in the case itself. Remember to line up your USB port before doing so you don't break it off when you're pressing everything back into place. Once you have it lined up, you'll go ahead and apply some pressure and you're just going to poke your post through the tape itself. This is really easy, and again, if it feels wrong or if it feels like you're using too much force, back off and just make larger holes. That's if you're running tape, of course. Once you've verified all your tolerances are lined up and everything feels good, we can move to putting our plate back on. Now this is a 2-step process. You can either attach your plate back to the PCB, or you can simply screw it all back together. I chose the latter. I didn't feel that the one screw made a difference to put back in the plate, though I could be wrong, so proceed with caution. But here, you'll just line up your plate and screw it all back together. And once it's all back together, you can move on to your switches. These switches need a lot of love. And with a lot of love comes some lube. It's weird, but it's factual. As you can see here, these are Kale style or Otomo style switches. So they have the long fasteners on the side. And these fasteners, you can simply pry open with a screwdriver, or you can use a switch opener like this. Simply press down and it'll separate the switch. If you're using a screwdriver, you'll just pry them off. Here we'll focus on where we lube, which is going to be the center post, around the center post, and the 2 brackets on the sides, avoiding the metal contacts, of course. Linear switch, we can lube pretty much anything in here besides the metal contacts. So we'll grab a small amount of lube. We'll do 3 brush strokes on each of these pieces. Once done, we'll put it in our tray and move to our next switch. Just repeat this process until all your switches are lubed. Remember, you want your lube to be like a ninja. You want it to be there, but you don't want it to be seen. It's really important you don't overlube. You can always come back later to add more lube. It's really difficult to take lube away if you've overlubed. So keep it slow, keep it steady. You'll win this race. With our switches, we also need to lube our springs, which I prefer bag looping. I dump all my springs into a bag. I use 15 drops of super lube, and then I shake vigorously for about 3 minutes. This is an arm workout, and it does get tiresome, so feel free to switch hands if you like. We'll make a little bit of air pocket, and we'll just shake, shake, shake. Once done, you will need to separate these out. When you pour them out into your tray or whatever container you're using, make sure you double check your bag. You don't want to leave any behind. It's kind of a pain when you are reassembling your switches and you realize that you're missing a spring. They're also really hard to find if you do lose one, so just make sure you keep an eye on things. Once you have everything lubed, it's time to reassemble them. This is as simple as putting them back together the same way you took them apart. It goes bottom housing, spring, stem, top housing, or opposite, top housing, stem, spring, bottom housing. if you didn't know. Once you have them all assembled, it's time to put them back in the keyboard. I like to start by putting them where the stabilizers are. This is typically where we would tune our stabilizers to see if we need to lube them or need to make any adjustments. But to be honest with you, these stabilizers are beyond saving. They're pretty terrible. They're scratchy, they're rattly, they're very thin, and they don't feel good. And I don't think any amount of lube will help. We are going to add some dielectric grease just to see if we can bring a little bit of life out of them, but the only way to actually make these any better is to change them completely. And that's not really a theme for a $12 keyboard. I want it to be more accurate to how a random person or the average person would be getting this keyboard. These are small little things you can do to improve it without going above and beyond. So, stock stabilizers, stock switches. But honestly, I don't think you can really get around this. I'd be curious if there was another way to kind of save these. I mean, there's Band-Aid mods and all kinds of stuff we could try, but honestly, it's not really worth it in the end because they still feel so bad. Regardless, we are going to try to tune them to the best of our ability before moving on and getting all our switches back in the board. Alright, all of our switches are back on our board, all our keycaps are back on, and honestly, I'm so confused. Our arrow keys are a weird size, and so is our backspace and our escape key. All between 1.25U, 1.5U. It's really strange, and it makes it really hard to find any other keycap set that would ever work with this board. Speaking of which, here's the other keycaps it came with, which I thought would be the saving grace. But as we pull it out to inspect it, we realize that these are just random keycaps. They're not even remotely the same. They're a completely different material, they're not shine through, and this enter key is for the 10 key enter. That's not even for this keyboard. These were just some random stuff off a shelf it looks like they threw into the box. It's more of like they're getting rid of their garbage by you purchasing it and adding in no value to the keyboard itself. It's kind of insulting, to be honest with you. And it sucks because they took liberties with this to make it impossible to change these keycaps. And that's not fair, nor is it fun. So yeah, this is it. And with all of our lubes and mod, we can hear how it sounds. So here it is. All right, now that you heard it, let's talk about it. First, these switches are not it. They feel terrible without lube, and after lube, they still don't feel good. They're scratchy and mushy with or without the lube, and they would need a lot of work to even feel decent. The keycap size for this keyboard is so random that I was unable to find any set that would fit correctly, and that's simply disappointing. Overall, the build quality feels cheaper than the $11 that we spent on the keyboard itself. You would need to spend 3 times that amount to even make it as nice as other $20 keyboards on the market. So for me, this keyboard is not one I would ever recommend for any budget, period. And those are my final thoughts. If you made it this far, please like and subscribe for more videos like this. I would really appreciate it. It would mean the world to me. And all the products besides the keyboard are linked below in the description box, because I don't recommend it. And that's the end. Thanks for watching, and keep keyboarding.